Hello everyone and welcome back to another WARNO Deck Deep Dive, as today we go into a division that has been here for a long time, but it has changed a bit over the years and it got a couple of slight buffs lately again that brought it a bit back, and that is ATS. Though this division was surprisingly hard to make work, so yeah, it's a bit of a talk, and yeah, I just want to jump in here. I played a lot of ranked games with it the last couple of days, and a lot of them weren't successful, but it finally made me to refine this deck into a decent state, and we're gonna go over this. So let's start in the logistics tab with the M151 Mud CV, one out of only 2 CV cards in this deck, so only 5 CVs. You gotta be a bit careful here, but there is no M1A1 CV that you can bring and so on, so it's a bit tough here to fit in another card. No other good CV in here. There's only another one with an UH, if this, and then the CPCs that are pretty cheap, yes, but the 2 availability on them hurts a bit. And then we have 2 supply cards. The Helmet, especially there for resupplying your artillery and resupplying bigger tank blobs, and then the Mud for the front line. I worked with 3 CV cards before, but I felt like you don't quite need them here. Then we come to the Infantry tab, and here we have a pretty solid mix, and that's one of the reasons why I thought like this deck should be easy to play, because what you get here is quite solid. I like the Ranger leaders, and they have a smoke grenade, that is nice. They actually have pretty solid firepower as a special forces leader, and the RCL is actually really also a nice helpful thing that you don't have on any other unit here as well, that can help out defend themselves against light vehicles, and also dealing out a bit more damage on infantry that tries to push them down, and so together with the sniper stun them down maybe before they can reach you. So yeah, Ranger leader here in a decent spot. Then we have Mech Rifle Dragons. The Dragon 2 is still pretty powerful. The unit itself, outside of that, is still also decent firepower-wise with 2 MGs. 60 points, obviously relatively expensive, but the 9-man squad, 60 points, like they still do decent as an infantry unit, and the Dragon 2 is pretty helpful. And then the cost-efficient variant is the one of the law for infantry fights, 10 points cheaper for the same firepower. So 2 cards of those on 1 vet, pretty standard. The special forces in this deck with the Rangers aren't amazing. The Rangers, they do decent damage on CQC, but they are relatively expensive. They're 9-man squad, and they don't get easy onto 2 vet, which for special forces matters a lot, because veterancy is where the special forces really kick in, because it changes how the veterancy levels impact them, and the veterancy level work way better for special forces than for other units, so getting them to 3 vet is usually where you want to be, but it's not quite as easy for these guys. The Ranger Dragon here, similar thing. There, even the 2 vet one is only 3 availability, plus they pay a lot for that extra dragon. Like, if they would come to the same availability curve as the normal Rangers, they might be worthwhile taking over the Mech Rifle Dragons. Currently, I don't quite feel that way, as they also 15 points more expensive. Same hit points. Sure, they deal a bit more damage, but it's not quite worth the 15 points there currently, and the availability hit. And then aircraft troopers, pretty helpful. They're actually really cost-efficient combat unit. They are 55 points, so yeah, it's just 5 points more expensive than these guys. And with the security trade can hold the flank nicely as well. And they can come in on the Black Hawk, so reinforcing positions quickly is pretty important with this division. You don't have any other major speed advantages with this, so having 1 card of fast reinforcements that can hold down a position where you need some infantry reinforcements quickly because you took some unexpected losses or so is really strong. And then, yeah, if you can sell the Black Hawk afterwards, the unit itself is pretty affordable as well. And then engineers, to have some shock units in here. They do their job fine. Yeah, 50 points, engineers, nothing special. Medium machine gun, always a bit unfortunate on engineer units because they can't use it in CQC, but outside of that, a quite fine unit. And then ATGMs, TOW2 does a great job when it is in the right spot, can deal a lot of damage. You don't get any IVs, so getting some ATGMs here is important. And the ITO, currently a bit overpriced, or low, at least too low in availability. Like, either of these things should change slightly in my eyes. Like, either this thing should go to 75 or maybe even 70 points, or they should go up in availability. especially with the changes to buildings and the stealth stats of buildings. ATGMs in general for the infantry teams might be a bit weak at the moment, and the Ito is the worst case out of that. But you kind of need it here, as to have a cheap option and a slight bit of a better availability than the Totu in matchups where the 20 AP is enough to actually do the job, as they still have good range and accuracy. So the stats of the Ito not that terrible, but yeah, the card itself is not in the best state. Then we come to artillery, and this is super important. Like, this is how you win most games here. M110s are one of the key factors in this deck, and they do a lot of work. They are great, they are fantastic, so you want to have both of them. Yeah, coming at one vet there. And then we have the mortars here that can be helpful to lay smoke or just keep on dealing some damage onto the enemy in infantry grinds as well. Just keep spamming there so that your infantry can work. And then the tank tab, this one is really solid nowadays as well. Both the M1 and the M60 got buffed lately. M60, I still feel it might be 5 points too expensive, but it is at least now in a pretty workable state for 30 points. The frontal armor is nice, and it can be max range fire support is pretty helpful as well early on, where you can snipe some APCs, can snipe some IFVs from long range, though with the 15 you usually want to have 2 around to kill something. Also work well when being used together with the other tanks as just a numbers game. And then the M1 for now 200 points with good availability curve. The 60, the 4 availability for a 16 frontal armor unit here on one vet is quite nice. The 17 pen is the issue of this tank, as that keeps it away from dealing massive damage, but it is fast, it has high speed, and it has a 50 cal as fire support on top that can be pretty helpful as well. So this is your mobile force. Having 2 or 3 of them as a mobile force in the mid game can be really nice. And then the M1A1, so that you have one of the heaviest boys out there. And yeah, they on one vet work fantastic as well. So you have a somewhat light tank, a mid tank, and a high-end tank, and that's something that most divisions don't have access to in the mix, so that's really a nice strong point for this division. And then you also have the Cav, which can be helpful as a bit of an IV replacement to give you some HE fire support for your infantry and win out infantry fights by stunning down the enemy infantry and make them incapable of dealing damage back. Like, the DPS of this unit is not amazing, but its capability to one-shot enemy IV positions, ATGM positions, and its capability of just stunning down enemy units so that their DPS tanks immediately as well is really important. The veterancy here also helpful to lower the aim time and reload time as well, plus giving it a bit more stress resistance so that its rate of fire doesn't tank immediately after taking some fire. And yeah, that all keeps the tank tab functional. Recon tab is the one where I tinkered the most, and I think it's also the most important one here because it isn't great. The slots are not amazing. The units that you get are actually pretty good, but you lack the baseline scouts, and the OH-58 is what I used for a long while, but it just feels slightly overpriced because for its minigun. Like, other divisions get a similar helicopter for 30 points, so that doesn't quite work out, and you can't really protect the Kiowa warrior efficiently enough to make that work, so that is not an option either. So yeah, Bradleys here, those are key. You want some more autocannons onto the battlefield, you want some Totus on the battlefield, because the tank tab Totu launchers here with the M109, they don't have 901, don't have smoke, and are slow, so that's a bit painful. Other divisions get Totu launchers for the same price that have smoke, so yeah, maybe something to buff as well in the future if this division needs some more buffs, and I feel like it could use 1 or 2 slight buffs. And yeah, one of them I will come to in a second. The LRS are great, as always. They have an AT weapon, they can hold, they have GSR, but they're expensive, so the deck in general having a lot of expensive units is a problem. That's where the M150 comes in. This is a cheap recon unit that can hold a flank, and bring a cheap ATGM around that is good enough for APCs to one-shot those, and also has long range and good suppression, so that can be really helpful, making tanks combat inefficient, and just the cheap price of to have a unit that can hold a flank early on is super key. And then we take the snipers, which replace the OH scouts because they are a cheap frontline recon unit with very good optics, and the double sniper on the Americans is really nice. And they also can help out with the forward deployment. And yeah, they're just something that is currently more useful than the scouts, even though yeah, recon helicopters are quite nice. And the normal scouts here, those I would love if the ACAF would be better again. The ACAF currently is overpriced. That's if this unit would go down to 40 or 45 points, which is where it should be after the nerfs of the RCL. This might be quite powerful. Like this one here is 40 points. It has a longer range tow, and it has a smoke. It still has a 50 cal, so yes, the RCL can give fire support against light vehicles, but it doesn't have smoke. Yes, it is a transport, so that might make it a bit more flexible. But usually transports are cheaper than their non-transport variants. Look at the Bradley. Look at yeah, compared to the BMP2 Recon, for example, and so on. But that's not the case here. So the ACAF, yeah, that thing should go down to 45, 40 points, and then you could bring those instead of the snipers again. Plus, have another cheap fire support unit on the battlefield that can help out, replacing the lack of IFVs that you have in this deck. AA, Ihawk, is good, really helpful. Chaparral, I found could be nice as a helicopter hunter, and you sometimes need those on the front line. Some decks, the lack of long range anti-helicopter otherwise is pretty painful. I played this with 3 cards of and only Pivot, Stinger, and Ihawk before, and it wasn't great. The Chaparral is pretty expensive for what it does, so I went to max vet here to at least give it as much efficiency as a unit as possible, as you usually don't want to bring all that many of these, but they can be nice on the front line, and as I said, good to support your pushes against helicopters, and there the 65% accuracy then can come in really handy, one-shotting 6 hit point helicopters and doing a lot of damage against everything else as well. The lower aim time helpful against planes too, so yeah, Chaparral here coming in nicely. Pivots, good fire support on the move, which you lack a bit here as well. Plus, yeah, helpful against all planes and all helicopters out there as well. And then the Stingers, they're just solid. And yeah, on 1 vet, 60% accuracy there is really nice. Range though, as I said, not perfect, if not quite the Mistral, so that's why the Chaparral is here. Helicopters, 1 of each. The Hawk is a great rocket helicopter, can help out a lot in infantry fights early on, and the Tow Cobra is a solid IFV killer that can be helpful in some scenarios as well. If you kill off the enemy AA and then you have an opening where you can slot these helicopters in, that they can snowball quite nicely. Cobras are still doing a decent job. With their 6 hit points nowadays, I feel like still they could maybe go to 125 points or so, but they still do it decently. Price in general, a problem of the American decks. Nothing here is dirt cheap, so getting to the combined arms a bit harder than for other divisions. But yeah, we'll get to that in a second. Airplane tab is pretty solid as well. F-16s at least got cheaper now. They are pretty good fighters nowadays. 220 points for what they do is quite nice. And you get 2 good cards there. Could even fit in a 3rd card, but you don't have the slots for that. Cluster F-16 unfortunately is pretty sad, so we don't use these. We instead use the A-10 as a tank hunter. They still do a decent job, and together with the Wild Weasel you can give them the area to actually put in some work, and yeah, the Wild Weasel later on can be quite helpful. And against heavy tank divisions, slotting in an F-111 LGB that can one-shot heavy tanks is really helpful as well. Or if the enemy has lost the air war completely, this thing can dominate the last 15-20 minutes of a game quite nicely as well. So yeah, the LGB here being slotted in nicely as well and doing its job. So what does this deck have as strengths? It has strong infantry tab. It has a great mix of tanks. It has, in general, good combined arms. Like, it has artillery, it has good AA that has all the tabs, it has helicopters that can be both do all the jobs like rockets at ATGMs, it has good air support, it can do everything you need to do. It pays for that though. First of all, its opener is relatively weak. It doesn't have the strong forward deployment. Its special forces aren't forward deployment, for example, with the Rangers and so on, so it is a bit vulnerable there. And it is just not quite cost efficient. Like, everything here costs just a bit too much on average, and you don't have the cheap baseline, which leaves your opener also a bit more vulnerable than you might hope. And then when you take a couple of losses, your combined arms can fall apart a bit faster than you want to. And yeah, those are the two major weaknesses. Like, and they are enough. Like, those two things alone keep it this division in B tier. It's not bad, but it is only B tier. And I also missed, obviously, that it doesn't have IFVs, which currently dominate the meta. So yeah, in the end, this division is just a B tier division at the moment, but that is fine. We had this division dominate the meta for a long time. I'm not worried that it will fall deeper than B tier because it has all those combined arms factors. And with a small tinkering here and there on a couple of their units, like the ACAV, it will go back up easily into A tier. So, yeah, hopefully that will happen for all of those fanboys of Rangers and Co out there. I know a couple of players who are really wanting to see the Rangers shine. The Rangers Dragon for sure a unit that could be buffed as well. And let me know down below, how would you build this deck differently? And see you all next time. Bye bye, and have a great day.